Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Guy Dauncey, an economist, an activist, futurist. He's also an author. He's written the latest book, 11th book, in fact, The Economics of Kindness, which explores how we can replace capitalism's culture of selfishness and greed with an economy built on cooperation, well-being, and respect for nature. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, about real-world examples of kindness in action, from tackling climate change to restoring democracy. Welcome to the show, Guy.
Happy to be with you, AJ. Yeah.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Guy. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about your book. We'll talk about the economics of kindness, and we'll talk about how we can change a world which is already changing so fast. So we'll talk about all this. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
So I have been a thinker, organizer, visionary all my life, all my working life. I've always been troubled by the many problems of the world, from the constancy of the wars, the conflict, the poverty, the stress that people go through today. It's not the housing crisis, it's the mess that's going on in Iran, in the Middle East right now. It's the mess over social media and the increase in hatred. The fact that we have these billionaires coexisting with people who can't get enough food to eat. But I was always intimidated by economics. I wrote, a bunch of books on 101 solutions to the world's problems, dealing with the climate crisis and cancer and war and violence. But when it came to economics, I felt, that's too big a topic. I don't understand it. It's intimidating. So about 10 years ago, almost exactly, I found myself walking in the woods locally, and the question came to my mind, like, what is the value of kindness? And I realized with that question, because value is a thing that economists, or, the value of eggs, the value of a house, the value of whatever. And what's the value of kindness? And I realized I had to start a deep dive into economics. So 10 years later, I have emerged at the other end. All those books, but I've had to read some 600 books on economics, economic history, and anthropology, all of which to come to an incredibly simple understanding. The capitalism really is the economics of selfishness, the need to maximize returns to shareholders, to maximize profit, and to disregard all the costs, whether it's people being poisoned in a chemical escape, or mountainsides being clipped clear of their trees, or workers being paid nothing. And so if that's the economics of selfishness, what is the economics of kindness? And it is a cooperative economy. So when people are kind, generally are happy to cooperate with each other. And most of the people who I'm friends with are kind and cooperative. If someone is acting as a bully and a self-important jerk, I tend to ignore them. And most of us do. We know those people. We tend to go around them. But the big banks and the corporations of the world are run by people like that, who say their most important thing is to maximize their returns to shareholders. So when we look at positively, what is the alternative? And it's not communism, and it's not even state socialism. It's a cooperative economy. And you've got a brilliant example in Kerala, down in southern India, the Kudumbashree movement, which is a partnership between the state government and women's movements throughout Kerala. Have got like 230 women's leadership units happening in villages where the women meet together to say, what is our priority? Is it the health clinic? Is it starting an organic food business? Is it, getting a new road built, whatever? They're taking leadership in a cooperative manner. They're really contributing to Kerala's stability and strength as, one of the most, with the provinces of India with the least inequality. And there's examples in Sri Lanka, just across the cross, where the Sarvodaya movement has got 15,000 villages, I should say, where people are working together to meet their community needs in a cooperative manner. So, and all around the world, there's examples of community-run banks, of public banks, of cooperative businesses, of mutual aid groups, of people finding ways to help each other and work together to build a strong economy. And in Mondragon in northern Spain, the process started in the 1950s with, the Catholic priest who said, well, what is an economy that's not capitalist and it's not socialist? And he said it's a cooperative economy. And now they have 80,000 workers in about 80 different workers' cooperatives with their own bank, their own colleges, their own welfare system. And the difference there between the highest paid and the lowest paid is like 5-1. I don't know what it is in India, but in America, it's like 600-1 between the CEO and a regular worker. And if you're running a hedge fund, it's like 4,000-1. It's ridiculous inequality. So I see a cooperative economy based on kindness as being more solid, more resilient, providing good jobs for people, having less instability and crisis. And then that applies to nature's economy as well. How do we bring nature into it? But I'll pass it back to you, AJ.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Guy. You have explained things very, very well. To understand it much more from a common person's perspective, common viewer's perspective, a viewer like me. What is it that you are trying to do? What is it that you are trying to say? What is it that you are trying to change?
I'm trying to get the entire track of our world away from selfishness and towards cooperation and kindness, both among humans and with regard to nature, that we don't treat nature as something we can exploit. And now I speak about it, it seems very simple to me. But for 10 years, I was struggling and reading and confusing and getting better ideas and thinking that idea is no good and that idea is really good. So when ordinary people say they find this confusing, I was confused as well. And if you study economics, you get no further down this road. Excuse me. Economics, the way it's taught, assumes that every human is a super rational, super selfish individual trying to maximize their personal welfare. But that's not how people behave. If you behave that way in your family, you very quickly lose a relationship with your children and they'll not like you. If you behave that way in your community, people will start shunning you in the shops and not want to talk to you. And when our hunter-gatherer ancestors, for 300,000 years, they lived cooperatively. But the secret to their cooperation was that they suppressed self-importance. If I imagine myself being a hunter-gatherer 300,000 years ago and I come into the camp with a great big, killed a big bear, whatever it might be, and I boast about it, they would say, what a stupid bit of rubbish. Is that the best you can do? You're a lousy hunter. Don't be so. Go back and do better. Because they're trying to pull me down a peg, stop me getting self-important. Because they learned that when people get self-important, in turns they want to dominate others and they become more selfish. And that can lead to tyranny and actually all the ills of the world. Because this tension between living cooperatively and living with someone else dominating you has been a central feature of all human history, whether it's the landlords dominating you, whether it's the upper castes dominating the lower castes. I know it's a big thing in India, and I know in Kerala they abolished the caste system in 1955 or something like that. Whether it's men dominating women, whether it's straight people dominating gay people, all of those things are painful and distressing and unnecessary if we learn to cooperate together, and we can do the same with the economy. So lots of big ideas, AJ.
Lots of good ideas indeed. But let's test it on, in terms of the real world together today.
Yeah.
We have traversed, millions and millions of years and come to this stage. We have tried with many different sort of, systems in various parts of the world. And we seem to think, we have also tried communism, socialism, every other sort of a thing. We seem to think that democracy is one of the answers, one of the best answers that is possible. Now, if we look at the economics of kindness, before any economic system, there is the political system.
Absolutely.
How do you bring the change in that political system that you talk about, the cooperative system that will influence it? Where in the world is it possible at such a scale? And then when you talk about the economics of kindness also, you talk about nature, which is so contradictory to man's inherent nature. Kindness is just one part of it, but it is layered by so many other things of wealth, generational wealth, control, factors of production,
But
and men want to
let
live.
me stop you here, because you brought up one really big topic and then suddenly you brought in three more. So the
Correct.
big one you started with, democracy. This is a really central piece of it all, because when we have to decide, if someone is dominating, whether it's President Trump or whoever it might be, or Putin, they just say, this is what you're going to do. They dominate you and they punish you if you don't do it. When you're cooperative, you've got to find a way to meet together. And that way is democracy. It may be messy and difficult, but no one's found a better way. It's better than all the other systems. The other systems involve someone telling you what to do. Democracy has to evolve, though. India, you've had a successful democracy since 1947. But in the West, popularity of democracy is declining, because we have say in Britain and in Canada and America, a system called first past the vote. So if you've got 5 parties competing, if one party gets 28% of the vote and the other parties all get 20%, that party wins, even though 3/4 of the people opposed it. So first of all, you need what we call proportional representation. So if you get 30% of the vote, you get 30% of the seats. But that's still, it's representative democracy. It was designed from the day when, you cast your vote and then your member of parliament would get on a horse and ride to Delhi or whatever, a long way away. We need to have a much more participatory democracy that's also deliberative. And that is happening through what's called citizens' assemblies. So you take a really controversial topic, like in Ireland, the topic was, Ireland was very Catholic, very conservative, very orthodox, and they had suddenly an awakening around, people being gay and wanting, same-sex marriages. So that was very controversial. People were arguing. They created a national citizens' assembly of 50 people who would, learn about all the issues, talk to people, learn about it, and come up with recommendations. And those recommendations were passed on to the government, and there was a referendum followed that. And by a big majority, Ireland voted to allow same-sex marriage and to stop being intolerant. So it's an extension of democracy. And there's one country in Europe that has a higher trust in the government than all the others. And that country is Switzerland. Because the Swiss they vote 3 or 4 times a year. If you get 100,000 people behind a motion, say you want to, let's think of an example for India. Say you want to protect all monkeys throughout India. You're never allowed to kill a monkey or hurt a monkey. And it's controversial because monkeys are stealing food and stuff like that sometimes. You'd hold an assembly to just consider it either way. And you come with a considered compromise or results. And people feel they've been heard a lot more. But in Switzerland, you'd have if 100,000 people can sign that, you'd have a straightforward vote, yes or no, and you'd either lose it or win it. But the Swiss people feel much more consulted and involved in their democracies and their government and their politics because they vote so often. Whereas other places, people, if in America, you feel like, it's a done deal. Only the millionaires get to make any difference in politics, because you can't even get into politics unless you're a millionaire, because they allow money to play such a huge role. In Britain and in Canada, the 2 countries I've lived in, there are now very tight rules on how much you can contribute to someone's election. I don't know what it is in India. So yeah, democracy is an essential part of this. You also mentioned nature. For thousands of years, we humans have kind of ignored nature. We think it's our right to cut down the trees and kill the animals and do all that sort of stuff. And then we end up with ecological collapse, and we have climate crisis, caused by the sort of basically pouring too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from burning coal, burning oil, and burning natural gas. So finding a harmony with nature is absolutely essential. If you picture us going ahead for the next million years, or 10 million, because if we don't blow ourselves up with nuclear weapons, we're going to be here. Of course, there's got to be harmony with nature. We have to have harmony with the oceans, with the forests, with the farmland soils. We have to not put nasty chemicals in our own bodies that are causing our children to be unable to have children because of pollution, So finding harmony with nature means having a fully circular economy where all our wastes can be reused and put back into the system of production. And there's, you eliminate pollution by, various forms of taxation and regulation. Anyway, you throw another question at me. You had so many thoughts there, AJ.
Absolutely. You put it very well. And that is where the thoughts were, Uh, Joined with that, and since you covered that, I'll come to them separately if need be. But I want to understand the solution here. I personally agree that the economics of kindness is a very good answer. In fact, this is what we humans are. Earlier, we could see it in a good amount existing in human beings. Things change in different circumstances, even today. But then how do you bring the milk of human kindness, inject that back into our bloodstreams again with so much of power? First is the political power, and then the economics of power, or economic power in the hands of a few people, which is much more possible in today's time because of, you can say, the ownership of technology, the way things are moving, and that they can hobnob with the political power. Political power needs them, they need the political power, and it's a rosy world only for them, and it doesn't matter. And
Yeah,
especially with artificial intelligence
yeah,
coming in,
you're
it's
totally right.
so that is where I want to see the ray of
Yeah.
hope, or the light at the end of the tunnel.
So the economics of kindness can only be made real through democracy. So I'm gambling that enough people will find it exciting to get behind politicians who say this is the way we need to run our economy, and not the old-fashioned way with big corporate people dominating everything and telling you what they want. When it comes to business, whether it's a big AI business or a Facebook or a global oil business, they all operate at the moment on the premise that the only thing that really matters is maximizing the returns to their shareholders and the capital gains they get. So in the book, I've looked at this carefully, and there are lots of voluntary arrangements when businesses can choose. There are lots of really good socially responsible businesses where the owners choose to do stuff responsibly. But it's never going to be enough. The speed of change is too small. So what I'm recommending is that every business is requested to create a new charter called a social purpose charter, where they state their social purpose, which is more important than just making money. Obviously, you've got to make money. If you make a loss, you make a loss. You've got to make some kind of a profit. And so it's a voluntary sign-on initially, that you sign on to this charter along with agreements to, respect nature, to bring, allow trade unions, to get women on the board of directors and various other things. But after either 5 or 10 years, it becomes mandatory. So during that first period, a company that signs on to a social purpose charter they'll get the best access to government contracts. They might get a lower rate of corporate income tax and stuff like that. They might even get a lower interest rate from the central bank. But after 10 years, say, of transition, any company that has not signed on loses its ability to work on government contracts, gets a higher rate of corporate income tax, pays higher interest rates, and eventually might not be allowed to operate, because basically the companies that don't sign on are saying, we are antisocial, we don't care about anyone else, the only thing that matters is our shareholders. And we as the people, through democracy, can say, that doesn't wash. That is not right, that you should behave that way. There's a duty of care to ordinary people, to the world around you. And we have to treat nature and the world around us with care and love, and not just with exploitation. So that would change the entire way businesses are working. It would create huge opposition. Those same billionaires and powerful people would fight back tooth and nail to stop this, because they want the freedom to get rich. So it would require strong democracies with government, with parties saying this is important for the well-being of all of us. And the evidence is that when companies behave well towards their employees, treat their employees well, allow trade unions, treat their customers well, they perform better. They are more stable, they're more resilient. They don't go through crashes and crazinesses. So it's better for everyone. So it's a big change, but we can't allow the world to go on being dominated by huge corporations who don't really care about nature or about other humans or about their workers. It's just not right.
Absolutely. So you need strong democracy.
Yes.
US is the world's biggest democracy, largest,
No,
biggest
India is
democracy,
the world's biggest democracy.
biggest democracy. So when do you think this will start from there? It's very strong democracy, has been there for quite some time now, much older than the world's largest democracy, that is India. So help us understand from there. I want to see the ray of hope from the place which is the strongest.
So the sad thing is, I have not been to India for 40 years, so I'm not well informed on your state politics. What I do know is the curious thing that Kerala was elected a communist government in 1955. And that communist government did not take over industry. It did not take over the farms. It acted in what we call a social democratic manner. And it changed its name many times. So it's no longer called the Communist Party, but it has acted in a social democratic manner, and it had been re-elected constantly by the people. So the same in New York, when the new mayor of New York, who's a young 30-year-old socialist Muslim, got elected by the majority of people in New York. He said, through democracy, you represent our needs more than the billionaires, so we're going to vote for you. It can happen when there's a clear vision of what the politicians are promising to do, whether it's affordable housing, land reform, food security reform, protecting the farmers, whatever it might be in a particular place. It'll be different in Kerala than it is in the Punjab. A democracy should allow the politicians to reflect what the people are thinking and feeling. And what happens sometimes is that there's a minority of people who prefer to blame the world's problems in Europe on immigrants, or in India, they might blame them on Muslims or on the minority. And we know from history this can go terribly wrong. This is a terrible way of doing things, because it's saying that your neighbor is not your neighbor. They're someone you're going to treat badly. So the regular people have to be strong enough to sort of resist that kind of easy blame game, when we'll just, in Britain right now, there's a very strong polarity between the what's called the Reform Party, that really want to throw all the immigrants out immediately, including people who, the children of immigrants, and the Green Party, who have come out of nowhere, who now, have a very strong appeal in the vote, who want to integrate immigrants well and end inequality, tax the rich, solve the housing crisis, and things like that, which most people say, yes, please do it yesterday.
Absolutely. Do you think this will begin in the future, or do you think this has already started happening, and that this particular process has to begin on a small scale, and that the countries that we know right now today, big or small ones, they will continue to exist in this form, but people will, start taking decisions in much more smaller units and bring about changes from their own respective areas till it will become such a big force that nobody can say no to it.
Yeah, that's totally right. Actually, this process of building a cooperative economy began 200 years ago. In the 19th century, in the 1800s, workers started forming workers' cooperatives and, collective community insurance programs and community burial societies and mutual aid societies. Then they said, let's have democracy itself, which is a cooperative act. So there's a long history of people resisting tyrants and kings and aristocrats. And you're absolutely right. It starts at the small local level. But in a country like Finland now, 20% of the entire economy is cooperative. In an area of Italy called Emilia-Romagna, which is like around Florence and Bologna, again, it's like 30-40% of the economy is cooperative, with hundreds of thousands of cooperatives. And they begin to work together at a higher level. So in Scotland, where the phrase being used was community wealth, which is a phrase to represent the need for local people to own local businesses, to have land ownership locally, to integrate with nature, to have fair democracy. The Scottish Parliament brought in a Community Wealth Act, which requires every government in Scotland, regional and local, to develop a community wealth plan for their economy, which means encouraging worker-owned businesses, cooperative housing, cooperative ownership of land. If a business is threatened with bankruptcy and people really need that business, it's the local garage or the local butcher or bakery shop, that the community can buy it and take it over and run it as a cooperative. There are pubs in England, where everyone likes to go and drink. They're closing down, and the communities can step in and buy them collectively. So this stuff is happening. We need it to have provincial and state legislation to support it. and then national legislation to support it, to make it happen faster. In Italy, they have, after the fascism of World War II, they put cooperation into their constitution as an important part of how Italy will operate, which enabled so many cooperatives to be established in Italy and people to be happily working in them. Because when you work in a cooperative, you're in charge of your own life. There's not a boss pushing you around. You can decide your future collectively together. It's a much better way to do things.
Absolutely, absolutely, Guy. But then some people will say, this way, when hard work, innovation will not get profitable, become profitable, give the returns that an individual want, then humans will become lazy. Everyone will almost become the same. Why should I work if I don't get the benefits and get to keep it for myself and creating generational wealth and for the future of my children?
Yeah,
How do you think?
I can see that. Let me go back to Finland. I know Finland's only 5 million people, so it's small, but they are consistently voted the happiest people in the world. They have 20% of the economy in cooperatives, and they're very creative. They have creative companies that do research and do innovation. In Mondragon, the place in Spain I mentioned in the Pyrenees, they have set up their own innovation laboratories where workers work together to develop new products and new ideas, both to replace a business that might be failing and to have constantly bringing up with new ideas and new stuff. So the people who do the invention and innovation, the engineers, the scientists, the technicians, a lot of them get excited by the process of innovation. So a cooperative company can equally well have innovation. It doesn't have to depend on greedy people individually to do it. So it's because there's a danger to that worship of individual power and money, which is that it goes to the head. I mean, we see Elon Musk is a good example. I read his biography in 2010 when he was creating Tesla, and I was amazed what a brilliant man he was and what a brilliant car he was and how hard he worked. Then power has gone to his head and he waves around Nazi salutes and he says terrible things about anyone who's not got a white skin, about immigrants and people with colored skins. And so power has gone to his head. And that is, I think, a constant genetic danger for all humans, because if we go back 1 million years ago, we were all living in the jungle with alpha males who pushed us around and ran the show. We have within us a hidden alpha male in many of us that would love to be the king. And then, but collectively we say, that's not a good idea. The rest of us don't like being dominated by you. But that instinct is still there. And we see it's when people get power or wealth, they become self-important. We've had a lot of cases in Europe and North America of comedians and film stars and film people who use their power to abuse women because they think they're important. And it backfires. It's very bad for all of us. So this is why the hunter-gatherer impulse to repress self-importance. I've almost come to think that self-importance is the ultimate sin of the world. And there's a lot in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads that will probably support me on that. Because self-importance is around ego, and ego is going to protect, get in the way of any kind of journey to nirvana you might want to embark on, because ego is the biggest barrier to enlightenment. Now we're getting very spiritual.
Spirituality is rising, and perhaps that is also one of the strengths that will keep a lot of people together, because it will tell them who we are, where are we going, where do we actually want to go as a species. And that is also bringing together a lot of people in one particular way of understanding life and our mission. It is almost like a new global world which is working separately beyond the boundaries of any country's boundaries. Maybe that is going to be one of the big things that could be the hope for the future.
AJ, it has to be, because we come to a place when all of our trade happens globally. The jacket you're wearing might have had the cotton grown in India and the cloth woven in Bangladesh and the buttons made in Ireland. It's all over the place. So we are in a global economy already. It is, but we're not working cooperatively as a global people. There's still all these stupid and horrible wars breaking out and people fighting each other. And now Pakistan is fighting Afghanistan. And it's not even in the news at all. So we have to think globally. if you picture, we've got, a million years of history behind us, or more than that, but if you picture going into the future and we're still one little clan fighting another, or one nation fighting another, the only word you can give it is stupid. When,
Right.
all the money spent on missiles and weapons that are being destroyed in Iran and, the Middle East right now could have been spent on public education, healthcare, music, the arts, better farmland protection, all that stuff. It is really very critical that the world as a whole move to a way of thinking cooperatively for the world as a whole and our long-term future in this universe.
Absolutely. So, Guy, do you think that in the coming days, because you see, you talked of Elon Musk, he believes that humans have to be multi-planetary species, and one home is not enough, and so that whole focus shifts, and a lot of people believe it in that particular way. If you want to look at it, that is the future if we want to survive. And a lot of these companies also are looking towards the space as the new frontier, orbital reefs and everything and whatnot, which looks good, which looks realistic, also needed also. And perhaps it is like also they are creating their new place where they will find their own type of people they will create. Does it look like that a lot of humanity will fight for Earth, and a lot of these people with a lot of money will fight for another place outside the Earth that we are trying to restore? Do you think that division has already started happening?
I've got two responses. One that says anyone with an interest in science who looks at the stars at night, who is curious about the universe, of course you want to explore. Of course you want to learn more. The other side says, though, in reality, if you wanted to live on Mars, you're going to be, your bone density, there's no gravity there. You're going to lose bone density. You won't be able to walk around after a while. You'll be inundated with cosmic rays that are going to cause cancer because there's no protective ozone layer. You're going to be isolated from people for years on end. You're probably going to die. And we have a beautiful planet, the most astonishingly beautiful planet here on Earth. If all that effort and billions of dollars was put into making life on Earth stable, we can still spend money on going to planets later, because the sun doesn't turn into, I think it's a black dwarf or a for about 3 billion years when we can't live here anymore. So there's plenty of time to think about it when we've got more advanced science and technology. The critical thing now is to make sure that we make planet Earth a livable place. Because if a few people go into space, 99.999999% of us are going to be staying here in our villages, in our homes, in our neighborhoods. And if all the effort was put into making our neighborhoods beautiful, with trees, with parks, with affordable housing, with cooperative businesses, with proper democracy, we'd experience the benefits of that right now, instead of the belief on paper that in 20 years, 10 people will live on Mars. Well, bully for them, as I'd say. We can think about that later. Right now, the crisis is here on planet Earth. If we don't control the climate crisis, the temperature in India, we'll have weeks on end when it's 50 degrees and people are just dropping dead from the heat. Anyone who's working outdoors, working on the farmland, will not be able to survive in those temperatures. Then you'll have terrible flooding, and then the Himalayas is melting. The Himalayas feeds all the major rivers of India. If we think about the consequences, and the solution is so easy, to move to solar and wind and renewable power. This is where we have to put our attention, not onto stuff up in space.
Absolutely. So your book, Economics of Kindness, who is this book for, Guy?
Well, first of all, it'll be published in about a month's time. It's not actually available yet, but it will be out in a month. It is for the general reader. I'm not a trained economist. There's no jargon. There's no mathematics. I write the way I talk right now. So it's for the general reader who is feeling really worried about the future of the world and wants to have a vision of something more hopeful. Everyone in that instance. And that includes economists, but everyone, I would hope, would enjoy reading it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So seeing the state of the world and when intervention is required, do you see the world and the future as an optimist or not so optimist person, Guy?
So AJ, I love watching soccer. That's my sport. Everyone has a sport they enjoy watching, etc. if I'm watching my team lose and they're losing 4-1 in the final period, I can become pessimistic. Like, oh, they're lost, it's defeated, I'll go home. But if I'm a player on the field, I have a choice of two things. I can either be determined or I can be defeated. And if I'm feeling defeated, the coach will hopefully pull me and put someone else instead. So because I'm an activist for making a better world, I'm neither an optimist or a pessimist. I'm determined to make a difference. And I do to do the best I can, as long as I have breath in my body and a heart that's beating warm. So pessimism is for people who are just observers or not doing anything. Optimism is for those who believe that if we all work together, we can achieve amazing things. So yeah, I'm a determined optimist.
Wonderful. Wonderfully explained, wonderfully said, Kai. There is so much to learn from you, and I'm sure so much to learn from all your books, including the new one that is coming out in a month.
Thank you.
So
I have a Substack. I have a channel on Substack called The Economics of Kindness. So if people who can't get the book yet, they can find that book on Substack. But you were going to say, I interrupted you.
Yeah. So what is the best way for people to connect with you so that, they can learn more about you, about all your books and the new book?
Yeah, through Substack. That's Substack, Substack. And you just put in the search for The Economics of Kindness, and you'll find a link to my work there. That's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Wonderful.
When the book is out, it'll be on Amazon, but it's not out yet, right? Amazon, a great big monopoly, but there you go. It's a contradiction for me.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for being my host, AJ. You've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.